Ever since the Horus heresy, the Imperium of Man has been assailed by the myriad warbands of the Chaos Space Marines. Many Chaos Lords have risen to glory and infamy for their actions in prosecuting the Long War. However, some names have been legends amongst the followers of the ruinous powers for over 10,000 years. Mighty warriors during the Great Crusade made the ultimate champions of chaos. Today, we look at one such individual, a mighty sorcerer seeking to plunder the Eldar's Black Library, responsible for turning his legion to dust. This is the tale of Ahzek Ahriman, Chief Librarian of the Thousand Sons. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. Ahzek Ahriman and his twin brother Ormuzd were born on Terra. They grew up as part of an empire from what we would call Southwest Asia that had allied with the burgeoning Imperium of Man, and so were spared the nightmarish unification wars. These battles saw the Emperor unite Terra and Mars using the Thunder Warriors, brutal ancestors to the Space Marines who were later culled from existence due to their excessively violent nature. Millions, perhaps billions, died during the unification wars, but Ahriman and his tribe were sheltered from them by their leaders' shrewd forward planning. With Terra and Mars now aligned behind the Imperial truth, the Legion as Astartes were founded, and many of Ahriman's tribe were inducted into the Thousand Sons, the 15th Legion. The twins fought together for 5 glorious years at the beginning of the Great Crusade, but then disaster struck for the 15th. Many of the Thousand Sons began to manifest psychic abilities, probably an echo of their still missing Primarch, Magnus the Red, and with this came the flesh change, horrific mutations that forced many noble battle brothers to be euthanized. Ormuzd fell as well to the flesh change, leaving Ahriman with nothing of his brother save a pendant that he worked into his power armor. It was rumored that the 15th Legion may have required destruction or disbanding, such was the taint in their gene seed. However, the Thousand Sons were to be saved from ignominy and destruction by the discovery of Magnus on Prospero. With the Thousand Sons and their Primarch reunited, the flesh change mysteriously vanished. Magnus was seemingly able to cure it, much to the relief of his sons. However, in order to perform this seeming miracle, the Crimson King had struck a deal, perhaps unknowingly, with the Chaos Gods, tricked by Tzeentch into thinking he had the cure to the mutations when he had in fact only bargained to stop them. It took decades, but eventually the 15th Legion were back in the Great Crusade. Ahriman's activities during the Crusade are largely unknown, although it is known that he spent 5 years seconded to the Word-Bearers Legion. The experience was extremely uncomfortable for Ahriman due to the Word-Bearers' worship of the Emperor as a god, but he was able to strike up a friendship with the chaplain Erebus. Erebus would, of course, be the one to convert Horus to chaos, but it does not appear that he had any effect on Ahriman during this period. Ahriman also publicly supported the Emperor's initiative of sending remembrances to catalogue the deeds of the Legion as Astartes, one of the few Marines to openly do so. He believed that if the civilian populace could see the good that the Thousand Sons did, they may abandon their old fears, prejudices, and discriminations towards Psykers. He rose to a very prominent position in the 15th Legion, Chief Librarian, Captain of the First Fellowship, and leader of the most powerful sorceress cult, who served as seers for the Thousand Sons. The first instance in which Ahriman is confirmed present was also his first act of defiance towards his Primarch. He had led a team to find Magnus during a standard compliance action on the planet of Argro, despite an order from the Crimson King to not disturb him under any circumstances. Later in the same campaign, Ahriman conversed with a rune priest of the Space Wolves Legion called Othir Wordmake, who had come to deliver a message to Magnus. He told the rune priest of the Thousand Sons' psychic disciplines in what he believed to be a casual conversation, though he was later to be proven wrong. At the time, however, their seeming friendship was useful when the legions were forced to fight demons before bringing Agro to compliance, the first confirmed instance of either legion fighting the Servants of Chaos. Around this time, Ahriman was also charged with inducting a remembrancer called Gaumon into the ways of the 15th, to develop the humans' own psychic power and thus encourage more pro-psyker beliefs in the Imperium. This was initially a success, until the pair were witness to the return of the flesh change to the Thousand Sons. They saw Ahriman's mutated brothers put down by Leman Russ, Primarch of the Space Wolves, on the planet of Heliosa. The sorcerer felt betrayed by Magnus, for the Primarch had promised that the mutations had been cured, and, to be fair to Magnus, he did believe it. And even a human like Gaumon could sense how torn Ahriman was. Ahriman's faith in Magnus was only further shaken following the Council of Nikaea, where the Emperor decreed that psychic powers and sorcery were henceforth forbidden throughout the Imperium and Space Marine legions. During the meeting, many spoke out against the use of the arcane, although Mortarion was likely one of the main opponents, where Magnus and the Thousand Sons seemingly stood alone to fight the Psyker's case. To Ahriman's horror and shock, the first speaker was Othir Wordmake, using what he had learned on Argru to condemn the 15th Legion. This would be the first of many perceived betrayals that day. Once the so-called Trial of the Thousand Sons was completed, the betrayal of Wordmake was compounded first by the Emperor's ruling and then by the discovery of Magnus's infernal bargain with the Ruinous Powers. However, the Chief Librarian was never to truly understand what that meant, as the Primarch wiped the memories of the deal from his mind. Despite the ruling at Nikaea, the Thousand Sons continued to study the warp and practice the arcane. Magnus retreated beneath the great city of Tactica, capital of Prospero, clearly troubled by a dark secret and keeping it from his sons. Ahriman was, of course, concerned by this, but even the combined might of the Legion's greatest sorcerers could not read the fates to see what troubled Magnus so. The truth was the betrayal of Horus. Magnus had foreseen his fall and knew of the plot to tempt him on Davin. His legion could not possibly muster to travel to Davin to prevent the wounding of the War Master with the Kinnebrach Anathame, but they could perhaps save him from the predations of chaos. Using the research of his old mentor Amon following Nikaea, Amon himself had ascended to the rank of Astartes when Magnus joined the Thousand Sons. Magnus combined the powers of his captains to project himself into Horus's dreams. Whilst he lay unconscious on Davin, Horus's soul was projected into the warp, where the ruinous powers showed him a vision of the Emperor and some Primarchs worshipped as gods. Horus was not among them, and while the vision was true, it was apparently Horus's own fault, although the gods didn't tell him that. Magnus, arriving partway through the vision, tried to prevent Horus from succumbing to this illusion, explaining that it was only a potential future that could in fact be changed or even prevented. But it was no good. Horus proved unsalvageable, giving in to his jealousy for his father. Magnus also learned through his conversations with Horus that not only the War Master had been corrupted, the entire Word-Bearer's Legion seemed to already be in thrall to chaos. Withdrawing from Horus's mind, the horrified Magnus ordered his sorcerers to scry the fates. The 15th Legion needed to be ahead of the game and ready to save the Imperium. In order to try and minimize the damage of Horus's upcoming betrayal, Magnus attempted to warn the Emperor. However, in doing so, he shattered the psychic defenses of the Imperial Palace and destroyed the Imperial Webway project within. Incensed, the Emperor ordered Leman Russ and the Space Wolves to capture Magnus and bring him for interrogation. Unfortunately for Magnus and his kin, Horus, who was still believed loyal at this time, contacted Russ and gave him new orders. The Emperor instead wanted Magnus and the 15th Legion wiped out. What followed became known as the Scouring of Prospero. When he learned of the coming of the wolves, Magnus accepted the fate the Emperor had apparently decided for him. He drew an outward shroud over Prospero so his sons would not know of their impending doom nor resist it. The Sons of Rust destroyed most of Prospero from orbit, but were forced into a ground invasion of the capital Tactica as it was protected by a shield. Magnus could not destroy or disable this without raising the alarm. However, whilst the Crimson King was ready to die for his crimes, Ahriman and his brothers apparently were not, and managed to hold Tactica for some time before being forced to retreat. Regretfully, Magnus decided to intervene at the last, passing his great tome, the Book of Magnus, to Amon, and asking him to give it to Ahriman. The Crimson King duelled his brother Leman Russ for a time, before, finally, teleporting his entire surviving legion into the warp to save them from annihilation. They landed on the planet of the sorcerers, pre-prepared for them by the Chaos god Tzeentch, and Magnus, underwent apotheosis to a demon Primarch. If the timeline in my head is correct, he was the first of them all. Following their arrival in the warp, Ahriman lost all respect for his Primarch, instead viewing him with naught but contempt. The flesh change, thought to be halted again, soon ran rampant for a third time within the Legion, and this time the Chief Librarian was determined to stop it, once and for all. Using the power of the Book of Magnus, along with his own independent research and his burning hatred for his gene father, he devised the rubric, a spell that he believed would stop the flesh change for good. He did, however, never clearly consider that using the energy of change to try and prevent a change was utterly useless and, quite frankly, absurd. The rubric did seem to work, at least on the small scale, but Ahriman alone was woefully lacking in power if he wanted the results to stick. In response, he gathered a cabal together of those who hated what had become of the Thousand Sons, including Magnus's old mentor, Amon. This cabal did have enough power, and combined they cast the rubric. The results were nothing short of astonishing. All but around 100 sorcerers within the Legion were turned to dust, although the survivors found their powers augmented massively. All those lacking the psychic gift of the Crimson King had their bodies instantly vaporized within their armor. But this was not the end for those tortured souls, as the sorcerers' energies locked their armor shut, trapping their spirits within. They became the rubric Marines, mindless automatons who could not function outside of combat without the presence of a nearby Thousand Sun sorcerer. Whilst in battle, there is some chance that they will fight alone, gaining a shred of memory. Depending on how you look at it, the rubric was either a roaring success or unadulterated disaster. The flesh change was indeed no more, but it had cost the independence, lives, and will of all but a select few legionaries. For Ahriman's part, he was horrified and disgusted by the result, and this only worsened when he came to fully realize what he had done. As for Magnus, he was incensed beyond all comprehension and assaulted the tower of the Cabal. Whilst his co-conspirators kneeled before their enraged lord, Ahriman stood defiantly, believing that he had truly done the right thing, despite the unforeseen consequences. Magnus was fully prepared to kill his chief librarian for this most heinous of crimes, but Tzeentch stayed his hand. Clearly this pawn was meant to play the game for a while longer. This meant that instead, Ahriman and his cabal were banished from the planet of the sorcerers and sent into exile. Following their exile, the members of Ahriman's cabal separated. The chief librarian himself went into hiding, trying to bury his past, whereas others sought to undo their grave mistake. Amon, probably the next most powerful sorcerer after Ahriman, fell into the latter category, gathering together as many rubricae, Thousand Sun exiles, and psychic apprentices as possible, forming a warband known as the Brotherhood of Dust. However, if they wished to repair their broken legion, the Brotherhood needed Ahriman, who knew the power of the rubric as its creator better than any other. To this end, Amon searched the galaxy for his former brother, chasing any whispered lead to the lost sorcerer. Eventually he found him, his powers suppressed and hidden as a supposedly weak sorcerer amidst a cornate warband called the Harrowing, and so set about attempting to capture Ahriman. He failed, his emissary forced to immolate his body and mind, almost killing his quarry in the process, to ensure that Ahriman could not decipher that Amon had sent him. However, Ahriman was able to track him down and infiltrate the Brotherhood of Dust, before being sold out by his ship, of all the damn things. Captured and interrogated by Amon, Ahriman was forced to give up what he knew of the rubric. Ahriman was then rescued by his allies, including an apprentice of a destroyed marine chapter called Astartes, but he was confronted by Amon on escape and fought with psychic power. In the ensuing mind war, Ahriman revealed the final secret of the rubric to his brother. It was bound to all of the 15th Legion, not just the automatons who now served them, giving them life and binding them together. He then contemptuously destroyed Armon in fire using this same binding power. The sorcerer's armour broke apart into its constituent pieces and embroiled themselves and Ahriman within a tumultuous vortex. The armour fell into place over Ahriman's body, concluding with the helm that would come to define Ahriman in future. This newly armoured sorcerer peeled away the paint from the rubric's armour, who now stood mindless awaiting the psychic command. He turned it from the red of the Thousand Sun Legion to the midnight blue we know today, telling his gathered brothers, now we begin anew. Ahriman now leads a warband called the Prodigal Sons, though whether this is simply the renamed Brotherhood of Dust or an entirely separate entity is unknown. He has, if the novel series bearing his name is canon, returned to Prospero and cast a second rubric, succeeding in restoring a single rubric marine called Helio Isidorius to sentience. He may have actually been more successful if a part of Magnus's soul had not intervened and sabotaged the procedure long in advance. It would appear the Crimson King's soul has split, similar to the rumours surrounding the Emperor. His fate, frustratingly for him and for us, remains unclear. Likely only the Changer of Ways Tzeentch knows how the road that Ahzek Ahriman walks will end. On 2 occasions, the sorcerer has attempted to enter the fabled Black Library of the Eldar, but on both occasions has been repulsed, including once by the legendary Farseer of Ulthwé, Eldrad Ulthran. Within the library, it is rumoured that Ahriman would be able to find the knowledge to become a Chaos God in his own right. Convenient, seeing as neither Tzeentch nor Chaos are recognised as his lord. Regardless of his fate, Ahriman has brought sorcerous and demonic doom to hundreds of worlds, and will not stop until it is decreed by the paths he has walked and the skeins of fate that draw his end, whether it be by death or ascension. He is the greatest non-Primarch Astartes sorcerer, further enhanced by his own rubric, with a keen mind for politics as well as war. Should he complete his quest, then the galaxy will tremble and the gods themselves will be at the mercy of Ahzek Ahriman. So ends the ever-changing tale of Ahzek Ahriman. Of course, there is far more to this story that I've had to gloss over here, and so I fully encourage you to do some reading if you wish to learn more. The Ahriman series of novels would be the perfect place to start. As for the Chief Librarian, who knows where his tale will end? We shall have to see. This is the 4th of our 40k Stories mini-series, Champions of Chaos. There's only one left now, the Champion of Chaos Undivided. Tune in next time for that epic tale. For now though, the change has been halted, and so the video ends. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and I will see you all again. Goodbye.